Welcome to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm speaking to you from New York City on this, the 21st day of 2020. 21st day, I should say, of July 2020. Before I talk more about today's show, I do want to remind you I'm the author of a newsletter called Jay Taylor's Gold, Energy, and Tech Stocks, and you can subscribe to that by going to miningstocks.com. Miningstocks.com, we'd like to put in a plug for Chen Lin as well, our buddy Chen Lin, who publishes What is Chen Buying, What is Chen Selling. ChenPicks.com is the place to go for that as well. And Michael Oliver, who's not with us today, but I know he's a favorite on this show, it's olivermsa.com. And we do want to thank all of you for listening, making it one of the more popular shows on the Voice America Business Channel. And we want to encourage you to continue sending along whatever your comments are about this show, positive or negative or whatever. Send them along to questionsfortaylor@gmail.com, questions4gmail.com. And I also must thank our sponsors, because without them there would be no show. Our sponsors for today's show: Great Bear Resources, Benchmark Metals, Hannon Metals, Irving Resources, Novo Resources, and Sitka Gold Corp. Well, with the Western monetary system sitting on the edge of the abyss, it certainly is time to own gold and silver. Arguably, you should have been buying it all along, because if you wait too much longer, it may be out of reach for a lot of people. In fact, we're seeing the price of silver up 6.82% today to 21.23 on the bid. So the metals are really starting to move. There is a growing need. Investors are feeling a growing need, and we're hearing that from investors, to own the metals and also the metals shares, which are really taking off as well. Now, last week, after listening to Michael Oliver, I realized that I needed a bit more silver in my portfolio, so I did go out and buy an ETF, just the quick and easy way to get more silver in my portfolio. SLVP trades on the New York Exchange, and it's up 11% in just a few days. So that gives you an idea that it's time to get moving in the shares and to own them and own the good ones. Because of the growing numbers of people not used to investing in gold, I mean, certainly gold and silver is not what most people are buying in America anyway, and as I noted last week, our son Scott and I are planning to provide a course for investors as soon as we can possibly put it together. It will be an online course that you can access for a fee. Several of you have indicated an interest last week, but we will need to hear from more of you before it makes economic sense for us to work to put this together. But we do want to get moving on it quick, because the metals are moving. Today is a great example of a real strong bull market in the precious metals. So if you are interested in a course like that, register your interest by going to questionsfortaylor@gmail.com, questions the number 4, taylor@gmail.com. Just let us know. Give us your email. Let us know if you're interested. We'll fill you in with details later. No obligation, of course, but we do need an indication of interest. I've titled today's show Common Sense 2.0. Bob Moriarty returns as my guest for today's show. Common Sense was a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine in 1775, 1776, in that time frame, that fired up members of the original 13 colonies in America to fight for independence from Great Britain. Paine marshaled moral and political arguments to encourage common people in the colonies to fight for an egalitarian government. Well, as a 73-year-old who attended public school, grade school in Dalton, Ohio during the Eisenhower years, I have seen a massive change in our country. Some of it for the better, like the civil rights laws, I would argue, very much needed, but much of it not for the better. We've seen the United States military-industrial complex basically, I think, gain tremendous control of our election process, of our political system. Eisenhower warned us about that back when he was leaving office. And we've seen this military-industrial complex make enemies overseas. We have killed untold innocent human beings with our bombs, and we have been involved in constant regime changes, many times regimes that were perhaps elected by the people. But for one reason or another, we have been involved in endless wars overseas. And, as Ron Paul suggested, not a very popular view for sure, but he suggested back in 9/11, that the reason they came over here was because we were over there. So there's many things that I think are not good about what's happened in America. There are some that are good. Most egregious in my mind is the loss, obviously the erosion of our First Amendment rights, and increasingly, it seems, a threat to our Second Amendment rights, the right to bear arms. So those two amendments are arguably two of the most important and basic rights granted to every American. The right to speak freely, especially if your views are of a minority nature. It's important that minorities can speak. And the right to bear arms, of course, a very basic American right. And now we know, thanks to Edward Snowden, that our government itself, one of the reasons for the Second Amendment was to protect the citizens against their government. Well, that's almost heresy to say that, but we know from what Edward Snowden told us that, in fact, our government is spying on us. And as a matter of fact, there's plenty of evidence that has come out of recent investigations that President Trump was spied on by the CIA and the FBI. So it seems as though no longer any of us are safe from our government's ability to spy on us and basically to cause a lot of trouble. This would have certainly made our founding fathers extremely unhappy if they were aware of what was to come in the future. So we do have a lot that needs to be, I think, a lot of things to be concerned about. And so an author, I would just point out that back in 1776, of course, we didn't have our freedom. The people that lived in the colonies were subject to tyranny by King George, and they really wanted to have their freedom. They were looking for freedom, so along comes Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense 1.0, that inspired Americans to risk their lives to fight for the God-given rights they believe that we have, that we are supposed to have anyway. Now, someone we don't know who has written Common Sense 2.0 to fit the current threat to our freedom as American citizens from an enemy from within this time. And a friend of mine who understands the intent of our founding fathers and what is required for liberty and justice for all is Bob Moriarty. And when I was talking to Bob a few weeks back, he brought to my attention a booklet titled Common Sense 2.0 because Bob believes this book is so important. He called it to my attention, and he asked if he could have the ability to come on the show and talk about it and to review it for us. He has spent time reading it, studying it, and he's going to talk to us about that. So, Bob, I'm really glad that you could join us today. You are a person that has certainly done a lot for your country. At least you thought you were doing a lot of good things for your country. As a young man, you flew 832 combat missions in Vietnam. And so it just seems fitting to have someone from your perspective to come on today to talk about Common Sense 2.0. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always good to hear from you, Bob. And first of all, I want to note, I believe that you're living in France right now. You're not in the United States. Is that right? And if so, why have you chosen? There's a lot of beautiful places to live in America. Why France?
Well, it's interesting to say that. I literally can't leave because I can't come back. What Trump and the Democrats have done with the COVID has made Americans persona non grata. And you can't come to Europe if you're an American.
Yeah.
So I should be going out on site visits, and I can't do that because as soon as I leave France, I can't come back in the EU. But I've got a place here in the mountains, in the Pyrenees. I do my writing here, and I love it.
It's a beautiful environment from what I can see. They really have locked us down, and I know that as in your analysis of mining companies, you do an excellent job, and you go on site very many times and travel long distances to visit places. So you must really be missing that, I guess, huh?
Well, I don't
yes
know.
No?
Okay, that's a really good question. I used to travel 3 weeks a month. It was pretty hard. I learned a lot, but I was gone a lot, and I rather enjoy doing a lot less traveling now. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I mean, Trump and the Republicans and the Democrats have no idea what they've done. They have dropped a neutron bomb on the world economy, and things are going to get much worse.
Yeah, I think that's right, Bob, and I think most people aren't really fully understanding the repercussions of this economic damage that's being done, and of course it's been sort of papered over like many other things. The government prints money and hands it out to people, and there's a price for that we'll be talking about in the next segment as well, I'm sure. But the anonymous author of Common Sense 2.0 says, and I quote, "We have entered the biggest crisis in American history." And so I'd like to ask you if you agree with that, and if so, why is it the biggest? I mean, we've had some biggies. World War II, I came a couple of years right after that onto this earth, but the Civil War was huge, and the Revolutionary War wasn't a picnic either for those that engaged in it. So do you think this is the biggest of all those, what we have coming? Do you think potentially it is the biggest disruptor of all?
I do, absolutely. And I would encourage you to think about the book, The Fourth Turning. This was actually predicted 30 years ago, but we have some absolutely incredible problems that have been ignored. Do you fully understand the concept of entropy?
Yeah, sure. It's decay.
Well, time brings decay.
Right.
If you think about a top, when it slows down, it gets more and more unstable.
Right.
If you think about a bullet leaving the barrel of a gun, its behavior, it's very predictable as it leaves the gun, but 300 or 400 or 500 meters downrange, it starts becoming more and more unstable. Mm-hmm. Entropy says everything gets worse. So if you don't fix a problem as soon as you can, it's going to grow and grow and grow. Now, as an individual or a family or a corporation, if you have financial issues, you obviously do something about it. The government, on the other hand, does exactly the opposite. Their solution to the stock market crash in March, I am absolutely amazed. Nobody predicted that. I think it's Harris in California who's saying that Congress should vote a $2,000 a month giveaway to every family in America monthly, permanently.
Yeah.
And nobody's saying where does the money come from. So what we have, we need to get into the book, what we have is a broken system. We have the opportunity to fix it, and we need to fix it before it gets worse. There's some really strange, dangerous things going on right now, and there is no such thing as the Democrats are all bad guys, and there is no such thing as the Republicans are bad guys. They're all bad guys. It's one snake, two heads. So let's go into the military-industrial complex.
All right, Bob, we're going to have to do that after our first commercial break. I would just mention that there is a number of things, that being one of them, the military-industrial complex, debt, and a whole host of things that I want to talk to you and have you explain about that's mentioned in the book when we get back after the break. I would mention also that finally in the last segment today, there are some things that can be done to try to overhaul, to try to fix. And I guess we have to look at things that we can do individually, Bob, as well as what we can hope and pray that society will do somehow. And I guess we have to do our part to try to speak the truth as we understand it so that things can get fixed. And we have to be courageous sometimes to do that because, Bob, as much as anybody I know, you say things that require courage, and perhaps it's those 600 or 800 bombing missions that you flew over Vietnam that shows that you have that courage. But anyway, we do have to go to break, and when we come back, I want to get into that military-industrial complex thing and the cost of all of that and all the other related issues.